Hello and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, and I think it's time for another research update because we've done quite a bit since the last time I ran through some of these. And all the headlines this time are because, well, we went off to Gleba, so we've got a load of researches that came from that. So of course, first off we discovered the planet itself, which allowed us to head out there and learn a little bit about the place. And then pretty much as soon as we got there we discovered the heating towers as well, because all that requires is for you to rip up some of these copper stromatolites, and then you get some useful bits and pieces from them, and you get the heating towers. That's very, very nice, because that's where all of our power on this planet is basically coming from. We did have a little bit of solar when we first started off over there, but pretty much it's all been based on the using the heating towers and the turbines. Interestingly, this also unlocks turbines, heat exchangers and heat pipes for you. I guess that's in case you come out to Gleba before you've discovered nuclear power, because that's where you'd normally unlock these, and that's where we unlocked them. But if you didn't have them, you'd be a bit stuck trying to create power just from a heating tower. It looks like as part of that, we also picked up the vacuum heating tower, which is pretty much the same thing, except it's one that you can use on Maluna, and probably anywhere else that doesn't have any oxygen in the atmosphere. So with this, it's going to be the same sort of effect, however you need to put in fuel as well as the oxygen, and it'll produce carbon dioxide for you. On a similar note to the heating towers, we also unlocked agriculture, and that's from pulling up one of these iron stromatolites, so I guess that's there to encourage you to pull up both types and have a little bit of both resources available. And that got us the agricultural towers, which is what we've been using to grow all of the fruit, and then also we've been starting to use that to grow wood over on Norvis, because it's much easier than the burner one we had before from Lignumis, because you don't have to fuel it. And that allowed us to then start learning about nutrients. We can make some from spoilage, and we can also apparently make it from wood pulp. I don't know whether that's going to be something we're going to want to do, but it might be useful. Actually, that could be very useful on other planets where we don't have Yamako and jelly nut available, but we still want to have some nutrients to allow us to use the biochambers, which do need nutrients to keep them running. And wood pulp is made just from wood. So anywhere that's got wood, and steam as well, I suppose, but anywhere that's got wood and a supply of water, we'd then be able to make nutrients and keep the biochambers running. And that could be very, very handy for using them on Norvis. And I'll run over why we might want to do that in a moment or two when we get onto the biochamber itself. Agriculture allowed us to then unlock the jelly nut and the Yamako, and these are, well, these you discover by digging up one of each type of tree, and that teaches you how to make, well, in this case it teaches you to make jelly and also how to grow the iron bacteria. So you can turn jelly into iron bacteria, which is a very, very valuable way of getting more iron bacteria and therefore more iron. And with Yamako, you get exactly the same thing for the copper bacteria, and that's how we've been producing iron and copper over on Gleba with the systems like this. So we're bringing in the jelly nut, and that allows us to produce jelly, which allows us to produce a starter culture of the iron bacteria, and then we've presumably we then later on unlocked the iron bacteria breeding. But to be honest, we never did just this step, turning jelly into iron, because by the time we started to implement it, we'd already got this step where you can turn iron bacteria into more iron bacteria. After these fruits, we then got the biochamber, and the biochamber is functionally kind of like a chemical plant, except that it has a base productivity of plus 50%, and also it requires feeding with nutrients. So if you can get the nutrient supply together, which as we were just discussing, we've now discovered that we can make from wood, and that's really valuable, then you can have what are effectively chemical plants, but that give you an extra plus 50% on your productivity. And that's really valuable, because there's quite a lot of recipes we're using that I think we might be able to move over to biochambers in places where they're using expensive things where we'd like to have that extra productivity. That could be things like breeding the Cupriovidus necators for plastic, as you can see down here. That also can be made in a biochamber. And in fact, if I look at the biochamber itself, you can see here a list of all of the recipes that can be made in it. So oil cracking could be done in one potentially. That could be useful. Making rocket fuel. So on a planet where making rocket fuel is the struggle, but maybe if you've got a supply of wood, but for some reason you're very, very short of rocket fuel, that could be very, very valuable to get you an extra 50% out. And because there's probably going to be another stage required in order to make the solid fuel, that'd be another bonus in there. We could get bonuses for the sulfuric bacteria recipes that we've got running over on Vulcanus that are making wood over there. That's also quite nice. And you know, I was actually expecting there to be more useful things in here. I thought these were not quite a plug-in replacement for a chemical plant, but that they could do quite a lot of the stuff that chemical plants do. But it does appear that a lot of the things in here are very, very biological specific, which, to be fair, makes a lot of sense. And in a way, I'm sort of glad that it's like that, because my gut feeling was that they were going to be a little bit overpowered. But I think there's going to still be a few useful things we're going to be able to do with them. We can't just do stuff like making batteries, for example, because I guess that wouldn't make sense. It's not a biological thing. Our next unlock was to get the artificial soil, and these were the things we were talking about before. I was calling it magic landfill, and these are the ones that allow you to expand out whether a particular area can grow Yumako or jelly nut. The ones that move it from being just the really bright purple to also being able to grow it on this sort of bright purple stuff here as well, although not out into the dark purple and the sort of the reddish stuff and those sort of areas. Or up over here for the Yumako, going from the hot mustard to the slightly calmer mustard, but not out into the various shades of green over here. So it gives you a bit of expansion, but not a huge amount. And then we got onto Bioflux, and Bioflux is it's basically just an ingredient for all kinds of things over on Gleba. The Bioflux goes into making many different things, including nutrients, but also most of the stuff that you can actually make on this planet that's useful as an end product, rather than some sort of weird intermediate fruit thing, comes from putting nutrients in. And you make this, as you've seen, from combining Yumako mash and jelly, and eventually after a couple of hours it'll spoil into spoilage, like nearly everything else on this grotty little planet. That unlocked the bacteria cultivation for us, and this is the one I was talking about a moment ago, where we can take in some of the copper bacteria and make more copper bacteria, or we can take iron bacteria and make more iron bacteria in exchange for some Bioflux. And this feels like a much better recipe, because as you can see, we're essentially turning one Bioflux into 3 additional iron bacteria, whereas the other recipe, making it from scratch, you're turning 6 jelly into a 10% chance of iron bacteria and 4 spoilage. So essentially you're turning 60 jelly into 1 iron bacteria, or alternatively you can turn 12 jelly and 15 Yumako mash, so 27 fruit stuff, into 3 iron bacteria. And that seems like a much more generous recipe and is going to be one that's much more valuable and getting much more useful stuff out of it. So I think the going via the Bioflux is going to be a much better way to do it, and that's why we've done so much of it. And over here we've got most of the copper that's being produced is being made through the recirculation and growing more bacteria from some bacteria and also some Bioflux, whereas we're only using the starter recipe to, get it started. And at the moment it's all gone to sleep, and that's fine because we have a mountain of copper, so I'm okay with that. Then we get onto Bioflux processing, and this is kind of what I was talking about how Bioflux is an important ingredient into basically everything you're going to want to produce. So along here you can see this is making Bioflux into plastic, this is making Bioflux into rocket fuel, this is making Bioflux into sulfur, this isn't making Bioflux into lube, this is just jelly. But you do often require other ingredients as well, so it's not just you have this magic ingredient that can be turned into absolutely anything. You often have to mix in a bit of other stuff like jelly and water, or Yumako mash, or over here it's spoilage. So they were all slightly different to keep you guessing and keep you having to work on new things, but they all have a certain similarity in that they all require Bioflux. And as the icon for the research down here kind of implies, yes, it's Bioflux being turned into all kinds of different useful things. That then allows us to make the agricultural science pack, which is, as we've seen before, that's Bioflux once again, and pentapod eggs. So at this point it's encouraging you to go off and find some pentapod eggs and work out what to do with those guys. And apparently it brings us close to discovering nanofoamed polymers. Now, is that something we've already got? I think that might be something we've already got over on Maluna. That might be the inflatable plastic that we've been playing with. No, that's the diffused plastic bar, which then turns into the microcellular plastic bar. So that's something completely different. And there's no nanopolymers in the Factoriopedia, so I don't know where that's going to come from. Maybe that's one of the big pile of question marky things that come from one of the planets that are scroll down here. That's something to do with Rubia. I don't know, so it's going to be interesting to find out about those, because that is a mystery and something that's going to be interesting to find out about. And once we had the agricultural science pack, we were able to then start working on all kinds of weird Glebian type technologies. And we started that off with carbon fibre because it looked like an exciting idea. There's going to be lots of useful things to get out of that. And we immediately then went on to the stack inserter, because stack inserters are amazing. The stack inserter is, as we've talked about before, it's an inserter that allows you to put things down in piles on a belt. So you can see here there's one cog here, that's come from a normal inserter, and then there's a stack of 4 of them there, and that's come out of the stack inserter. So the stack inserter allows you to lay down these big piles of whatever it is they're picking up, and that means you can massively increase the throughput of a belt, as we can see in here with the spoilage on this belt along here. And so essentially by piling everything up to a height of 4, you can fit 4 times as much stuff on your belt. So a blue belt goes from being 45 items per second to being 180 items per second, which is significantly more. And that's a sort of bonus you don't get from just upgrading your belts. That's the sort of thing you can only get by getting the stack inserter upgrades. And even better than that, Getting these stack size upgrades also affects your big mining drills and a few other machines as well. So you can see here we've got 4 size stacks coming out of all of these mining drills over on Igris. We've got stack sizes of 4 being pumped through all the way along here, and there'll be a few places like down here we've got stack sizes of 2 here. So that must have been after we researched the inserters, but before we actually got all of the upgrades and got it up to being a stack size of 4. So that's quite interesting. We've been very, very happy to have those. And then yes, we've done another couple of upgrades. So stack size capacity. So this one gives us a +1 upgrade, which I believe took us up to +2 for a total of 3, and then this one which gave us another +1, bringing us up to the current maximum of 4. It's displayed a bit weirdly here though, in that it shows the bonus and what it would do if we unlocked it now, which is apparently why it says +4 when we're currently at +3. This one also gave us a +1 bonus to non-bulk inserter capacity, which is, quite nice to have, but especially for the long inserters. And elsewhere we can just use the bulk inserters or the stack inserters, but when we have to insert something a long distance, or actually over a diagonal distance, then having this inserter capacity here is going to be quite nice to have. So it's worth having anyway. After that, carbon fibre also got us the rocket turret, and this is a turret that fires rockets. Who'd have thought it? And believe it or not, that seems to be basically the head of a Spidertron. So we're repurposing the Spidertron heads in order to lob off rockets at their enemies. We've not really used any of these. There are a few on some of the spaceships, and we've discovered that if you put blue rockets in them, they're massively overpowered and very, very dangerous for everything around them. But we've not used them in particularly large quantities yet. But I'm sure they will be very useful in the future. Then we unlocked Bioslurry Putrefaction. Lovely. So that allows us to, do Bioslurry Putrefaction. Okay, so that's turning Bioslurry and a load of other bits and pieces and turning it into crude oil. So that could potentially be useful. I'm not sure where we get Bioslurry from. So Bioslurry can be made through wood astroponics, but that requires you to have fertilizer. So that can be made from carbon, sulfuric acid and water. Okay, so this might allow us to start making oil in space, perhaps. There's also recipes to make it from Yamako and jelly nut, although it does require the seeds, so that's quite expensive. And you make it when you grow things from liquid fertilizer, so maybe. But then all of our spaceships that are using trees are using this recipe, and then they're turning the bioslurry back into fertilizer using this recipe. So that's a closed loop between those two. But maybe if you put in productivity modules, you could have a little bit left over and you could turn it into crude oil. I don't know if that would actually be useful, but it's a potentially interesting one. But I don't really know. I'm not sure this is going to be that useful, because I'm not sure we're going to have lots and lots of spare bioslurry in order to do fun things with it. But you never know. We may come in useful in the future. We shall wait and see. And then we unlocked Gleba Astroponics. This is kind of what I was just talking about. And this is for growing Yamako and jelly nut out in space, and then presumably starting to use Glebian type recipes on a spaceship. I, again, don't know how useful this is going to be. Maybe you could make bioflux and then have lots of the bits and pieces that you normally make from the bioflux on Gleba up in space. So I can see some potential there. I don't know how useful it's going to be. I can't think where I would want to use it just yet, but I can also see that it's the sort of thing that might surprise us and we go, hey, you know what? If only we had some fruit up here to gnaw on the long interstellar journeys, maybe we'd be able to make some plastic and some low density structures out of it. I don't know. We'll see how that goes, but this is a curiosity that might be quite interesting at some point in the future. We've also developed carbon fibre walls, so we can make a wall out of carbon fibre and apparently nickel and stone, and then presumably that's going to be significantly tougher than a normal wall. So a normal wall has a health of 350, at least for a normal quality one, and various resistances of around fairly sensible seeming numbers. Carbon fibre wall has a health of 1200, so it's between 3 and 4 times as strong. And I think these resistance numbers look slightly better as well. So it's going to be quite good. It does have to be made in a forge though, so that's only going to come from Castra. But it's going to give us a new thing that we can play with. Maybe it'd be good to have on some of the extra other planets. It might be quite fun to use this one on Gleba because we've got the carbon fibre and we don't really have stone bricks, but we can make them if we have to. And we can import the nickel from Castra if we need to. So maybe. I see it being slightly better, but to be honest, a lot of the enemies on Gleba don't really care about walls anyway, so putting in stronger walls isn't really going to have a lot of effect on them. Finally, in the obviously very, very Glebian things, we have the overgrowth soil, and these are a bit like the magic landfill that I was talking about earlier, the artificial soil, except these ones can be used on the darker green and maybe even this sort of bluey shade colour here. So we'd be able to expand these areas out quite a lot more. So we wouldn't be stopped just by the edge of this dark mustard colour. We could also then build out maybe out onto this darker green down here. Here we go. So here is some artificial Yamako soil as I've got in my hand at the moment. And we can see if I take it out all the way over to here, I can't put it on deep water, which is kind of fair enough. And if I go out down here, I can't place it in the grey areas, but I can place it basically anywhere in the green areas. And these areas here are areas that are already good for growing Yamako, so that's why I can't place it there. But essentially it will allow me to turn this entire area, except for the water, into an area where we can grow Yamako. So this will allow us to expand drastically out here. I might have to do some cliff explosives up there, but this will allow us to find areas where we can grow absolutely enormous amounts of it. So for example up here, this would be really good. Apart from the blue patches, we'll be able to convert this whole area into growing Yamako and just have much bigger plantations. Down here looks really good as well. There's still quite a lot of deep water that's going to cause us some problems, but it's still going to allow us to grow Yamako in much larger areas than we have done before, in return for what's actually quite an expensive recipe. As you can see here, it takes 2 of the artificial Yamako soil, so it's already twice as expensive, then an additional 5 seeds and 50 spoilage, which is basically enough to make a load more of the Yamako soil, and then you need some biter eggs and some liquid fertilizer. Now most of that, it's not too bad. We have a lot of the seeds, we have a lot of spoilage, we have a decent amount of the Yamako soil because it's basically made from seeds and spoilage and possibly nutrients. The fertilizer, we're making that out on this planet. It's being produced over here, or at least it will be once Mike cleans out the spoilage over here, and we'll have loads of that, so that's not going to be a problem. The only tricky part is the biter eggs, which I guess we'll have to ship over from Norvis, and you've seen how we're going to start making those in the last episode, so I won't try and keep those as a surprise, but we need to ship them over here, or ship all of the components the other way, which seems much sillier. And then we'd have to start making that in quite large quantities, and my concern with that is how many biter eggs would be able to fit into a rocket. Looks like 500 into a rocket. Okay, so that's enough to make 50 overgrowth Yamako soils, which isn't a huge number, but is also reasonably significant. So yeah, a few rocket launches to bring those over, and then a little bit of panic, and hoping desperately they're not going to hatch when they arrive, or on the way over, or anything like that. So it seems manageable, but it's also going to be a bit of an effort to go out and carpet large areas with this stuff. It's not just something we can set up and go, yep, there we go, well, that'll make loads and loads for us and we'll be absolutely fine. And now we're going to move on to sort of Gleba adjacent technologies. So things like fish breeding. So now with one of our biochambers, we can take in 2 fish and we can make 3 fish. It also takes a load of nutrients and water, but that's fine. I guess we can make the nutrients from either the bioflux as we're doing on Gleba, or from wood as we discussed earlier. And if we do it on either Gleba or Norvis, water is not a problem. But that creates fish, which you then presumably have to worry about going off, although maybe they'll stay alive and nice and fresh if you keep them in the output of the bio chamber. We'll have to see how that goes. And it also allows us to turn fish into nutrients. So 1 fish becomes 20 nutrients, but 1 extra fish requires 100 nutrients. So that is not a net positive recipe. You cannot turn fish into more fish without having a feed-in of some other organic substance, which, you know, kind of makes sense. I'm all right with that. I feel like that's kind of acceptable. I do note in passing that there is another recipe for making nutrients from fish, but that still only produces 40 nutrients per fish, so it's still not going to be a net positive. Unless you throw an enormous quantity of productivity modules at it, perhaps, maybe then you'd just about be able to manage. I think it's a silly way to make nutrients anyway, so we probably won't do that. Continuing down the Glebian science path though, with the agricultural science back, and because we know about guns and rockets and things, we're then able to learn about captivity. And this is the one I was talking about in the last video, where we can go out with the capture bot rocket and then lob one of those at a biter spawner and capture it and then start extracting biter eggs. And so that, well, there you go. With that we get the captured biter spawner allows us to produce biter eggs, lovely. And we can turn those biter eggs into nutrients should we feel the urge to. I don't know if that's going to be useful, it may well be, we shall wait and see. Fairly quickly after that, we then built ourselves a capture bot rocket, and that allowed us to go out and capture a spawner, which gave us biter egg handling, and that allowed us to then operate one of the spawners once we captured it by feeding bioflux into it and allowing it to then start producing biter eggs. At this point, we felt we were on a bit of a roll, so we carried on researching along this path, and we got the biolabs, which we've seen before in the last video. These are the labs that have a 50% science drain, so all of your science packs go twice as far. That's really, really nice. So it just makes our science a bit more efficient. important. We got the productivity module 3s, which is a productivity module giving you a plus 10% productivity at the cost of requiring a biter egg to make each one. But once you've got them, they're quite nice to have. We also learnt about biomending, and that's a system where you can repair a biter egg or a pentapod egg. So you take in one of those at any level of freshness you like, combine it with some bioflux and liquid fertilizer, and then on the other side, you get out 99% chance of an egg at 90% spoiled. And this is valuable because when you use a pentapod egg to make a science pack, the freshness of the science pack that comes out is the same as the freshness of the pentapod egg that went into making it. So if you potentially passed one of these through a thing to repair it, and then into your machine to make the science pack, you get out slightly fresher science packs. That said, the amount of time it takes for the egg to get from here to here in order to be made into the science pack is insignificant compared to the amount of time the science pack then sits on the belts. Granted, the pentapod eggs do only have a spoil time of 15 minutes versus an hour for the science packs, so the freshness level of the pentapod egg is kind of 4 times as valuable. But that said, it's all being done close enough together that I don't think it's really worth it. Looking at other things that require pentapod eggs, these all seem to pretty much be things that are stable, with the possible exception of the agricultural science pack, or are things like breeding the pentapod eggs, in which case they come out full freshness anyway. So I don't see any real value in that. You're better off just sort of continually churning your pentapod eggs and producing fresh ones all the time. Similarly with the biter eggs, none of this stuff really matters from a freshness point of view. The only time it's going to be particularly useful is if you need to transport them long distances and have a system that freshens them up on the way over. But given you can't examine an item with the circuit network and see how fresh it is, I don't know how useful that's going to be. I suppose you could have a system that churns through them relatively slowly and always takes out the least fresh ones. That could work and would make sure you maintain them all at a decent level of freshness so they wouldn't go off in transit, but I'm not sure that's actually going to be useful. It's a nice idea, but I don't think it's going to be all that useful in the real world. And now we get onto the less squishy and biological researches we've completed recently, starting off with steam production on space platform. And that, as the name suggests, allows you to make steam in space from thruster fuel water and thruster oxidizer. That makes a lot of sense because thruster fuel and oxidizer is clearly capable of making a lot of heat, so if you feed some water in there then you can make a load of steam. I wonder if that's a realistic way of making power, or if it's for when you need steam for other purposes. It's steam at 500 degrees, so you could put it into a turbine, and it saves you taking along a nuclear power plant. So it's basically a sort of a miniature nuclear power plant that runs on thruster fuel and thruster oxidizer, instead of needing all of the space for the nuclear power plant itself, having to bring up fuel for it, needing to then worry about heat exchangers and heat pipes and so on. So it's an interesting idea that might be quite useful for small spaceships, just to keep them powered and running if they're going out into dark areas. But I think, to be honest, we're probably just going to move over to having nuclear power plants on our spaceships, like Mark has started doing with the Gleba imports and exports. They don't take up that much space, it's not too difficult to build, but it's a novelty and something a little bit different, I suppose. After that, we got the advanced asteroid processing. This is very exciting because this one allows you to get lots and lots of different resources out of the asteroid chunks that are floating around in space. And so, instead of a metallic asteroid just turning into iron, a little bit of stone, and a chance of getting your original chunk back again, we've now got the complicated one over here where it turns into iron, crushed iron, copper, stone, and a chance of getting it back again. So this is actually very, very useful because suddenly we have a supply of copper in space. You also get a bit less iron out of it though, because on the default recipe you get 20 iron ore out, but with the new one you only get 10 plus 1 crushed as well. So it's a little bit less coming out, but you do get the copper in exchange for that, which is very, very valuable. And this does mean that if you have a need for more iron, then you could set your systems up intelligently and have them switch back and forth between whether they're doing the basic or the advanced metallic asteroid crushing, depending on what you need. Similarly, carbonic goes from carbon and a little bit of coal up to carbon, sulfur, and a little bit of coal. So you're getting another ingredient out here. That's very useful if you need to make explosives or acid or other stuff like that on your space platforms. And to complete the trifecta, the oxide asteroid chunk goes from just giving you ice and some sand as a byproduct over to giving you ice and calcite as well. And calcite's very, very useful because that means you can then start using foundries in space, and that means the iron and the copper you're getting from your metallic asteroid crushing is going to go even further. You're going to get the 50% bonus, you're going to be able to turn it into the molten iron and molten copper, and therefore get even bigger bonuses when you start turning that into useful stuff on the other end. So this is, again, very, very valuable. It makes your ships bigger and more complicated, but as an offset, you don't need anything like as many asteroids captured to make a lot more stuff. I mentioned the productivity module earlier when I was talking about the biter eggs, but we've also picked up the efficiency module 3 as well. And as benefits, a module that you don't really use all that many of because the speed modules and the productivity modules are far more exciting. The exotic ingredient that goes into this one is spoilage. So, you know, kind of boring, but also it's kind of a boring module, so that makes sense. As a reminder, for Speed Module 3, you need to take in the tungsten triangles, which is a good intermediate one, because this is something that's going to need to be transported over from Vulcanus, so it's a little bit complicated, but it's nothing like as complicated as having to worry about biter eggs. And speed modules are very, very useful, but nothing like as powerful as the productivity module, so it's all quite nice and balanced there, and I approve of that. We've also unlocked epic quality, tier 4 quality, so we can now, when we're making things, we've got a chance of getting things all the way up to epic quality, which means they'll probably run much, much faster than the previous tiers, but this is as far as we can go until we go off to some very, very exotic planets, so we're not going to be seeing quality above 4 for a while. We've picked up calcium sulfate recovery, which allows us to pull calcium sulfate out of nutrients with the application of a few other expensive things over there. I don't think we've found any real uses for calcium sulfate yet. It can be used in various weird processes to make nutrients and to make stone as well, but I don't see any of that being enormously important. Maybe this would have been handy on Gleba if we hadn't had that really, really lucky roll with the absolutely massive stone patches scattered around our base, and we'd need to generate a load of stone for landfill on this planet. But given we started off with more than 500,000 in the middle here, of which we've still got more than 200,000, I don't think that's been a particularly big deal. We've discovered uranium isotope workings. That's an interesting one. What does that do? So we may discover tiny clumps of uranium-235 and we'll be able to turn them into actual 235, and same with 238 as well. I have no idea where we're going to get those from. It says Shattered Planet in the planet that we've got these from, so it feels like we've got this research very, very early on and aren't going to be able to use it for a long time. But you never know, we might discover some little bits and pieces scattered around the place that we can do something handy with. We've unlocked fertilised greenhouse tree growth, and feels like, yes, this is another clearly very, very Glebian one. Maybe I should have mentioned it earlier, but I don't think it's something we're going to use on Gleba. But these are the same sort of greenhouses that we've been using over on Maluna, but now there's an alternative recipe that uses nutrients as well as seeds, carbon dioxide and water to make trees, and presumably this is a significantly more efficient way of making them. Yeah, so by adding in 5 nutrients, the rest of the ingredients are all exactly the same. Oh no, you need a little bit of extra carbon dioxide, and you produce 5 more trees, so 50% more trees in exchange for 5 nutrients. That seems quite good. Those extra 5 trees could then be turned into, presumably, another 20 wood, and as long as you've got some steam around, the 20 wood could be turned into 300 wood pulp, which could then be turned into 30 nutrients, and then run that process 6 times over. So yes, if you do a closed loop, as long as you keep feeding steam in as well, which you should be able to, because there should be water if you're able to grow trees, then this will expand very, very quickly and give you a more efficient recipe. It's the usual sort of thing with Factorio. It's a way of getting significantly more output from your system, but in exchange for making a significantly more complicated system, because you'll have to worry about taking some of the wood away to turn it into pulp, to turn it into nutrients, and then feeding it back into the greenhouses. But you get rewarded by 50% more output for the amount of input and the amount of time and the number of greenhouses and so on and so on. So that seems worth having. We then unlocked something that seems a little bit imbalanced and against the spirit of the way the game is supposed to run. And that's the space chest. This is, as it says down here, a chest that you can place on a space platform away from the cargo bay, so you can have storage somewhere on the ship other than in the cargo bay. And that feels a bit weird because the whole system is designed around you not having those. It is fairly expensive. You need to bring carbon fibre and aluminium together, which come from 2 different planets, and you need a processing unit, so they're not exactly cheap, but they're not exactly that expensive either. I don't see that being difficult to make, and it feels like it sort of spoils how things work a little bit. I don't know. It does also only have a storage size of 1, so it's not exactly a big chest. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. It feels like it's going against the spirit of how space platforms are trying to work, but then it's a novel thing for a mod to add in. I don't know. We'll discuss this amongst ourselves and decide whether we feel they're cheaty or whether we're allowed to use them. Just, see how we feel. And then finally for this section, we've unlocked Advanced Space Research, which is a new recipe allowing, as it says down here, the production of the space science packs in space. So previously, we've been making those on Maluna in enormous quantities over here, bringing over all the necessary ingredients, the iron, the copper, the ice, and the glass, and then building them up here, putting them into rockets to take back over to Norvis. With this new research, we would in theory now be able to make these on a space platform, so we could go back to the vanilla way of making them, where you just produce them in orbit over Norvis in a space platform that's just sitting there and just doing that, and then throws them down to the surface as and when they're required. So it removes some of the logistical requirements in there, but we already have a system set up on Maluna to build them, So, is it worth it? Maybe. It would simplify things up a bit. It would mean fewer rocket launches. It would mean a bit less strain on one of the ships, a ship that is not remotely strained, I hasten to add. So I think it's going to be one of those things where we probably won't bother, at least for a while, because if it ain't broke, why fix it? But potentially in the future, if we want to increase production quantities of everything, then maybe we'll switch over to that. I assume there aren't any benefits, it's just the same recipe done in space. So here we go, this is a standard one we've been using so far. 1 ice, 2 iron, 1 glass and 1 carbon, done on Maluna to make a space science pack. And then we've got the advanced version of it, which is the same ingredients and but done in space, and this makes 2 of them. Okay, so it does halve the price of the science packs. So there's a certain element of encouragement there for making them up in space, but to an extent we haven't been struggling to make them fast enough. So whilst it is a valuable reward, halving the price of a science pack, it's a very simple and cheap science pack, and therefore maybe not worth going in and upgrading until we're actively going out and looking for jobs to do, I suspect. And now, well, now it's time to take a look at that most exciting type of research, the productivity bonuses. These all follow the same basic idea. They take a production process that we already have up and running and give us a little bit more each time it runs. Typically, that means a 10% bonus, so running the recipe 10 times means you get 11 items on the output, and then 12, and so on. And that's given us bonuses to asteroid crushing, ore smelting, engine production, explosive ammo production, holmium catalyzation, Igrian copper plate and glass production, mining productivity, plastic bars, processing units, rocket fuel in 3 different ways, steam turbine production, sulfuric acid and thruster fuel. Oh, and special ammo productivity. What on earth is special ammunition? Oh, okay. Special ammo is weird stuff like flamethrower and Tesla ammo and the follower capsules. Interestingly, we've got productivity bonuses there instead of just extra damage, so that just makes the ammo cheaper. Well, I won't say no to that. Then there's some other bonuses as well. We've made electric weapons and explosives better, and flammables better 7 times over. We've got 3 bonuses to the number of combat robots following us around, and that was probably for Castro in the hope that it would boost the number that the combat roboports could launch. Then we bumped up our max health level, our tool belt, also known as inventory size, and as I said earlier, bumped up the transport belt capacity. Oh, and our construction and logistics bots are now little speed maniacs with a bonus of 7. I think that covers that section quite neatly. In this final section of the video, I want to take a look at the new toys that we've not played with yet. One of the risks of multiplayer Factorio, and even single player if you're not paying attention, is that exciting things can be researched without you noticing, and they might not get properly taken advantage of. For example, I have no recollection of this burner lamp that we apparently unlocked shortly after arriving on Norvis. Now, okay, these days it's been replaced by much better options, but still, I don't remember it. And on a slightly more sensible note, I don't remember this belt counter either. From some investigation, you can connect it to a pulsing signal, typically from a belt or an inserter, and it'll tell you the average number of items per second. Is that useful? Oh, who knows. We also have the selector combinator. These we have used, but I don't feel like I've achieved the full potential of them. They allow you to extract interesting information from signals, like stack sizes or picking one of them at random. We've picked up active noise cancelling, which would go wonderfully on Lignumis, except that the chunky walls we've already put around the factory are more than capable of keeping the noise in. Perhaps we'll put them next to the rocket silos if we increase the launch cadence. We've also learned about manual colour modules, which prevent trains with them in from being automatically recoloured. Again, is that useful? We've not used them. We've also not really used lunar regolith digging because that didn't appear until after we'd basically done Maluna. We do seem to have all the resources we need out there, although that's at least partly because we had a couple of uranium patches grandfathered in when we did the update. Also from Maluna is the low density space platform. We've been using that for science packs, but it apparently has a lot of potential for making faster spaceships. We should check that out. We also got the rocket buggy, which is apparently a light scout vehicle with a rocket launcher. We've made 1 or 2 of these, but not really used them very much. I suspect they'd be great at blowing themselves up if we gave them blue rockets. Corundum gave us a couple of recipes for asphalt. This appears to only be useful as an alternative way of making concrete, which is a shame. I hope we'll be able to make paths out of it. And we've also got the sulfur poison capsule, which is another thing to throw at enemies, but I don't have the best opinion of capsules in general, so we'll probably skip that too. We've talked about the pressure lab in the past. This is the lab that only works with quality science packs, and so it's a lovely idea. We just don't have the packs to run it. Does the atomic bomb count as a lost research? We've not really used them because we haven't found a worthwhile target for them yet. And I mentioned the uranium isotope workings earlier. That one is definitely still a mystery to me. And on that nuclear note, we're at the end of the list. There are still a few things in there that we've not used, things like carbon fibre walls, but I don't think there's anything else in there that we don't know about and should be using. Have I missed anything? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the science update. Come along on Monday from 7:30 PM UK time to see us playing with some of these new toys, and maybe even after I've shown this video to the guys, they'll be going, oh, I didn't know we could do that, let's go off and play with that. Like things like the making space science in space, for example. If you fancy giving the mod pack a try yourself, then you can grab the Planetary Pioneers mod from the Factorio mod portal, install it, it'll give you all of the planets, all of the quality of life mods that we're playing with, and then let us know how you get on with it on the Discord. It's always good to hear from other people playing the same game as us. Come along on Wednesday to see what I'm playing then. At the moment I'm currently playing Foundry, but you never know, by the time this video comes out I might have finished that, I might have moved on to something else. There'll be something being played anyway, but those streams start at 8 o'clock. And these videos will be coming out every Thursday and Friday on the channel as usual, so please make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any of them. Thank you very much for watching, hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.